The media is saying that we need to be afraid of Christian nationalism. Now, specifically, Sky News lately was warning British people that this is a problem. They admit that, well, it's kind of always been an American thing, but we're seeing it here now. What exactly does that mean, Christian nationalism? Is that what Christians say they are? Why is it so scary? Can you imagine them saying this about any other group? Like, we're really concerned about the rise of Hindu. You know, what are we going to do about that? Hindu nationalism.
The Quakers.
Right. So joining us to discuss is Father Robinson. He is a British expat living in America, so he has a good perspective on why is this so scary in the UK? Why is it scary in the US? First of all, why is the term used as a slur and not a neutral descriptor, do you think, Father?
Because it's the truth, and the enemy hates the truth, and so he will always use it as an attack. I find it hilarious, though, especially that this is happening back home. England is quite literally a Christian nation, right? So we have a king who's a supreme governor of the Church of England. We have a state church, the Church of England, which is encapsulated in our judiciary, our legislative. It's in both houses of parliament. We are literally a Christian nation. So to be called a Christian nationalist shouldn't be a slur. It should actually be the default for everybody in my country. It's bizarre that we've gotten to a point where the left can go, ha, you're a Christian nationalist, you far-right bigots. It's like, we were all Christian nationalists about 2 minutes ago.
Right. What do you think they even mean? I read the whole Sky News article about why it's scary, and I could not figure out how they even define it. Could you?
Well, it means anything. It means whatever they want it to mean. It's a scary bogeyman word. But the people they were writing about, I know very well. Bishop Kai Dewar and I pray together every week. In fact, people can find him on my YouTube channel at Common Sense Crusade. We pray on a Sunday evening at 3:30 Eastern Time, and he's a wonderful Christian man. And in the interview with Sky News, or as I call them, Sly News, he sat there and he said, look, Britain is multicultural, but we are a Christian nation, and I want to lead people to Christ. Now, that's something that I should hear from every single clergyman. Like, what's strange about that? What's far right about that? What's even Christian nationalist about that? It's the basic truth that if you are a Christian clergyman, you believe in Jesus Christ, and if you want to love your neighbor, you want your neighbor to believe in Jesus Christ too. Therefore, your job is literally to lead people to Jesus Christ. And we've come so far away from our faith that at this point, the people in the country are saying, what are they doing? That's strange. What are they observing? This kind of weird religion. It's our religion. It's our national religion. Thank God for people like Bishop Kai Dewar who are bringing it back. You know, I saw him on the stage with Tommy Robinson. I don't know if you saw that clip where he was leading people in the Lord's Prayer. He's like full of vigor and zeal. And that's what we need right now. Not these wet liberals who are like, oh, yes, well, we're quietly Christian. We don't want to tell everyone about it. That would be uncouth. Like, no, we need to tell everyone about it. Go forth and multiply. Disciple the nation.
Or this new strain where there's an old guy on Fox News that no one watches called Mark Levin. And he, I think over the weekend, was basically saying that unless you have to in America, or you're basically anti-American, you have to adhere to the Judeo-Christian values. You can't just be like a Christian nationalist. You have to adhere to Judeo-Christian values, otherwise you're anti-American. So this is the kind of thing we're hearing now from people like Mark Levin.
I feel sorry for Mark Levin because he's been led astray quite clearly by modern heretics, dispensationalists who pretend that the state of Israel, the 1948 state of Israel that Britain helped create with the Rothschilds, is somehow the Israel that we find in the Bible. They both have the same word, sure, but it's not the same thing. The Israel of the Bible was there 2,000 years ago. This new modern state with Benjamin Netanyahu committing war crimes is not the Israel of the Bible. But people like Mark Levin aren't smart enough to discern that, and they've been led astray. And Ted Cruz is very similar. And so when Mark Levin gets there on camera and says, you must follow Judean values, you must follow Christian values, you must follow Judean Christian values, otherwise you hate America, he means it well. You can see he means well. But he's confused. There's nothing Judean about America. That none of the founding fathers...
Right, I was just about to ask. I know there's a lot of talk about... Sorry, can I follow up on this?
No, please.
We talk about the founding fathers, and I see people all the time saying, yeah, well, I saw Mark Levin say, the founding of this country, it was built on Judeo-Christian values. And I'm sorry, I'm just going back to all of my reading about the American Revolution, the founding fathers, sure, referencing the Old Testament, But where was their Judeo values pushed into the United States Constitution or Declaration of Independence, the founding of our country? Whether you had deists, you had Christians, you had Quakers. But I'm sorry, maybe I missed that part. Maybe you could educate me. Where did I miss that, Mark Levin?
Clayton, this country was around for 200 years before the word Judeo-Christian was even uttered anywhere in the world, right? It's a post-World War II phrase that actually originally meant Jews who converted to Christianity, which is what we should want. We should want all Jews to come to know their Messiah, Jesus Christ, right? And so we should want all Jews to become Judeo-Christian. It wasn't meant for Christians to become Judeo-Christian. It wasn't meant for Christians to water down their faith and pretend it's the same as Judaism. Jesus Christ is the living God. That's what we believe as Christians. Jews reject him as the Messiah, as the Christ, as living God. Therefore, they are not fully in the faith. Therefore, we should want to bring them in. But this Judeo-Christian waters it down and says, well, we have the Old Testament. The Jews have the Old Testament. Therefore, we're the same. It's not the same. We believe in a person who is Jesus Christ. We believe that person is God. We believe he is the only way to salvation. The only way to the Father is through the Son. If you reject the Son, you reject the Father. No one wants to reject God. That's the way to hell.
If you've been seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you should know exactly what your rights are. That's why I want to tell you about Morgan & Morgan. They're America's largest injury law firm with over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states. And unlike a lot of firms that settle quickly, Morgan & Morgan doesn't take lowball offers from insurance companies. Just in the past few months, they won $12 million in Florida when the insurance company offered only $350,000. And in New York, they secured $6.8 million on a case where the offer was just $275,000. And the best part? It's absolutely free unless you win. Insurance companies try to pay out as little as possible. Morgan & Morgan fights to get you more if you become their client. It only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case, and you can do it right from your phone. It's that easy. You can visit forthepeople.com/redacted, or you can click the link in the description to get started.
My mother is a Jehovah's Witness and an ardent Jehovah's Witness. And I was asking her about this because her faith tells her not to put any faith in politics or man-made governments because she has a faith only in Jesus Christ and God. And I asked her what she thinks of Judeo-Christian values, and she had no idea what that meant, because she doesn't follow politics. It's just not something that is defined in her strict Christianity. And I was raised a Jehovah's Witness, and I had never heard that before either. And so I had a really good conversation with my mother about her Christian faith as entry through this politics. But another thing that Sky News is telling us is that Christian nationalism is anti-Islam. And not just anti-Islam, because, of course, if you're a Christian, you believe in your faith, you don't believe in Islam. That doesn't mean you hate Muslim people at all, but that's what they're selling us. And a Christian is not allowed to hate people and attack groups of people. So what do you make of this angle?
So Christians are called to love our enemies, and that's the hardest thing in the world to do, right? But to love your enemy means to lead them to Christ. To love your neighbor means to lead them to Christ. And therefore, if we love people who follow Muhammad, we want them to stop following Muhammad because we see him as a false prophet at best. Some of us see him as a demon. We want them to stop following him and to start following Christ. And that means we can make a distinction between the person and the ideology they follow. We used to call it love the sinner, hate the sin, right? So I hate Islam, but I love people who follow Muhammad. And I want those people to come to follow Christ, because that's the only way, I believe, that's the only way they can get to heaven. Now, in modernity, people who aren't Christian want all Christians to secede to the idea that, well, Christianity is a religion among many religions. It's one way to heaven amongst many ways to heaven. It's one way to God amongst many ways to God. But we don't believe that. They want us to be universalists or pluralists, and that's a heresy. I cannot accept that Islam is an alternative path to heaven and that Muhammad is an alternative path to God and that Allah is an alternative of God. I can't. My faith teaches me there's one way. There's a narrow gate to heaven. And again, his name is Jesus Christ, and all that follow him will go to heaven, and all that reject him will go to hell. It's a really simple faith, really. I can't water it down for people to make them happy.
In the United States, if you had your druthers, Father, what would the rise of Christian nationalism look like in the United States? What would, if you could say this is what I would wish for in the United States, What would
Well,
it
we
be?
need this right now because many Americans are falling into the trap of believing, much like we just said, that Christianity is a option amongst many options, forgetting that this country is a Christian country founded by Christian men with Christian ideas and Christian principles. The founding documents were implicitly Christian. In some of the settlements and some of the colonies, they were explicitly Christian. Everything about this country is Christian. And that gives people the freedom to worship the Christian God or not. But that doesn't mean that other faiths, other ideologies, other gods should have equal weight. And right now in Dearborn, we're seeing Christians being persecuted. We're seeing the Adhan, the call to prayer, that horrible noise at 5:30 a.m. blasted into people's homes. In Texas, we're seeing a Sharia city being built, and people are trying to push back, but they don't know how because they think, well, they have a faith, I have a faith, they're allowed their faith. Sure, they're allowed their faith, but they're not allowed to build their faith in your Christian country. Americans need to wake up and say, no more mosques. This is not a country for mosques. This is not a country for an ideology built by a warmongering pedophile who married a girl at 6 and consummated it at 9. People who follow that are lost. We want them to come to know Christ. We'll help them. We'll love them. We won't hate them, but we'll hate their ideology, and we won't build monuments or buildings to that ideology because we see it as evil. And some things are explicitly good. Some things are explicitly evil. Islam is evil, and Americans need to say, we don't want it in our country. Thank you very much.
I've just been spending quite a bit of time lately going back to one of my favorite subjects, which is the American Revolution, and just been reading as much as I can on it. And one of the books I just picked up recently is about George Washington as a Christian, just his faith, and it permeated just about everything that he did. He believed that, if he was going to be shot, he would be shot, but that he was being led by God to lead this country. So when I look at the founding of this country, I just don't know where these people come up with this idea. So what would the founding fathers have said at the time of allowing freedom of religion in this country? But you go ahead, you can build, like in Texas, what's happening there, or in Dearborn, Michigan. Like what? I know I'm asking you to put words in their mouth or think in that way, but what do you think?
So we have the ideas that they gave and the words that they used at the time. The word religion has evolved, and I think part of that is the enemy changing. The enemy often changes words like racism is often thrown about at people today as a power dynamic between whites and non-whites. That used to mean discrimination between against someone based on their ethnicity. In a similar way, religion used to mean believers in God, and now it's been warped into believers in a God or believers of a type of faith structure. No, that's changed. So when the founding fathers said freedom of religion, what they meant was you can be a Catholic or you can be a Protestant. It's up to you. What they didn't mean is you could be a Jew or a Mohammedan or a Hindu or a Sikh. That was never a consideration. And so the people who are running this country now should be considering it from the founding fathers' perspective of how do we make this a better Christian nation? How do we better implement Christian morality into our legislation? How do we, stop the killing of unborn children, for example, or promoting the Bible in schools as another example? Good things. And how do we stop bad things coming here, such as people building statues to Satan and calling it a satanic club, for example, or building mosques to Allah? All these examples, there are legislators, people who are governing this country need to think about from a Christian moral perspective.
Well, it's interesting, though. We're getting to a point where these things will hit the Supreme Court more and more. And most of the justices are Catholic. They still are. So, it's interesting to see how that will play out. It's just something I've been noticing myself. So,
do you think we'll see the battle to get rid of same-sex marriage, for example, through the Supreme Court?
No, I don't think so. The Supreme Court declined to hear an appeal to that because, it was a crazy appeal in the first place. No, I don't. But I guess I'm just saying this. I wish that you and I had a book club. I just finished Amy Coney Barrett's book, and she is a Catholic. And in fact, most of the justices are, and that had escaped my attention when I was a liberal. And so I'm going back now to read Clarence Thomas's biography because he too is a Catholic, and books by Antonin Scalia, and I'm just interested in how those things. Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm not really asking you a question. I'm sharing.
Well, he is a man of integrity, isn't he? I don't know if you watched his swearing in. They were grilling him, and he's just standing by his beliefs, and he's willing to die for his beliefs. That's what I think we need. I do see that in people today. Charlie Kirk is another one. You mentioned the founding fathers and George Washington and people willing to die, not wanting to die, but willing to be shot for their Christian beliefs. And I think Charlie Kirk was another one of those people who thought, you know what, if I stand up and speak the truth, I'm very well may be shot for it, but it's still worth doing anyway. And that's what all of us need to do as Christians. Christians, as conservatives, as people who are patriots and believers in Christendom and the West, we need to stand up, speak the truth, proclaim the gospel, fight against heresy, fight against evils of false religions and false gods, and do that in love and in grace. And then this will be an even better nation than it is today.
Yeah.
Father, someone in their chat room just said, we got to clip that part. You talk about building a religion, and clip that and post that on social media. Father, always great to see you. Always eye-opening, and you always get me thinking. So thank you so much for that, as always.
It's always a pleasure. God bless you both.